Well, what we're going to do here, these are the three subjects: foreclosure auctions, tax deed sales, and then we're going to go in some title problems. Kind of what I've decided to do, because of how complicated the different subjects are, is we're going to spend about 30 minutes talking about the foreclosure auction process, and then I will stop and let you ask me some questions about it. Instead of going an hour and a half, be down here in title problems and you've forgot your question on foreclosures. So we're going to go through the process, talk about the foreclosure auctions, and I'm going to stop, let you ask me some questions about that process, and then we'll move on and do the same thing with each subject, because I know the second that I start, you're going to have a question. So let's get through the process of the foreclosure, and then, like I said, we'll stop for some questions. So the first thing we'll go is we're going to talk about the foreclosure auction. Now, the handout that I did give you, really what's in here, and we don't have to go through it step by step. This is just for your information, has a little bit of a foreclosure outline, talks about the different things, but we're going to go through that right now. So we're going to talk about the different types of foreclosures. We're going to talk about the steps and the different documents involved in the foreclosure, how to bid, and then, of course, the issues with the different delays and title problems. So first, we'll talk about the different kinds of foreclosures. Here's what we will see when we're going to look at foreclosures. Now, these will be the kind that are being auctioned. We say courthouse steps. We all still use that, just because that's an old-fashioned term, but we still use it. But it is online, and I'm going to talk about that online process when we get to the bid section. But first, what the most is mortgages are being foreclosed. But sometimes we do see contractors' liens are foreclosed. Condo and associations, we're going to talk about that, because that can be also complicated. And then what we call partition suits. I've left this at the bottom. We may not really get too into that, because that is very complicated. Let's just start with the mortgages. You will have first mortgages, and second mortgages will also be foreclosing, but we're going to want a first mortgage, obviously. Okay, but seconds do foreclose. Okay, but like I said, when you are going, and Joe mentioned, when you're doing a foreclosure and you're going to buy one at the auction, you will definitely want to make sure you're buying a first mortgage. That sounds simple, but it's not. Some people do their own searches, but we have actually found that rarely is anybody doing their own searches anymore. The volume has become very high. Today, I think there was maybe 48. Tomorrow, there's 46. They start at 11, and they just start going, clicking through those searches. So there's not a lot of time to do the search. You don't have 3 days. You don't want to spend 3 days trying to figure out the title search on a foreclosure, because that one may not even go. It may get canceled that morning. So you've spent a lot of time, and it's easier if you have someone do it. I'm not the only service. There is another person that is doing foreclosure searches. But either way, you want to get that done. So what we would focus on is, obviously, we want a first mortgage. And the reason is, if it's a second mortgage or a third mortgage foreclosing, a lot of people think that when it forecloses, it wipes everything out. Well, that is not true. Okay, we're going to go into that. A second mortgage foreclosing is in second position. So if they get the property, or if you bid on that and you won the property at the auction, there would be a first mortgage that would be ahead of you. Okay, does that make sense? Contractor liens can also be foreclosed. So someone goes and has a big room addition done, and they have $10,000 left, and they never pay it. The contractor files a lien. The contractor can actually foreclose on their lien. Okay, so you do see that. It's not as, we don't see it as much now, because usually they have first mortgages. So again, same concept. The contractor's liens, if they're mortgages, they are not wiped out. Okay, so that, again, you would want to look to see if this contractor's lien that was foreclosing was going to be a first, basically, priority on this property. That brings us to what we see a lot of. Condominiums and associations are foreclosing a lot right now. Okay, we're seeing that probably 5 or 6 a day. are associations and condos. And this is you have to be super careful, because we have found people that are coming in and bidding, because it's an online process, so you can be in Texas and bid on a auction here in Duval County. And the rules are different state to state. So they may come from another state, be bidding on this thinking that it's a first that they're wiping everybody out, but they're not. Same concept here with the contractor's liens. If a condominium is foreclosing or an association is foreclosing, if there's a first mortgage, a second mortgage, those are superior. They are still there. You buy that association lien, you have bought ownership and possession of the property, but you may be subject to a mortgage. People will still buy them. You will say, well, I'm hearing people are still buying them anyway. Okay, that's a decision that you make if you want to buy one. People will buy them and rent them out until the mortgage company forecloses, because they, again, are first. Every once in a while, we see one that may not have a mortgage on it. You see that more in condominiums because the fees can be high. So they could have $40,000 worth of condominium fees, plus the attorney's fees. All of that has brought it high, so it may not have a mortgage on it. That's rare, but those are out there. So we would look at that. If we were doing a search, we'd say, hey, yeah, that is that lien is first. There's no mortgage. You would be the owner, but you'd have to deal with, then you've got condo fees. So that is also a kind of foreclosure. I'm just going to mention the partition suit. We are seeing those more. What happens there is you have different people that are maybe in a legal situation, heirs suing each other to sell, a family inherit. I'll give you just an example. We're not going to go a lot into that because it gets complicated, but brother and sister inherited a property. Brother wants to sell it. There's a lot of expenses. He's paid taxes. He's done all of these things. He wants to sell the house. Sister says, I don't care. I'm just sitting here and I'm not going to sell, whatever reason. He can actually do a partition suit, get a judge to rule that he can force the sale. And those get done in that auction process. And you see them right there with the foreclosure auctions. So that's a little bit scary, because you can't tell. When you go on that auction site, which we're going to talk about the auction site and bidding in a few minutes, you don't know. It doesn't go, this is a mortgage that's foreclosing. This is an association that's foreclosing. This is a partition suit that's foreclosing. There is no differentiation when you're on that site. It has the address, the RE number. You have a link. You can look at the final judgment, which you could go try to look at it and cipher through that. It says the bid amount, and then it'll have like a minimum bid. So nowhere does it show you what they're foreclosing on or what is being auctioned, and that's because it's not up to the county to do that. They really can't. That they can't disclose those kind of things. They don't know. They can't say it's a mortgage, it's a first, it's a second, it's an association. They can't do all of those things. So you don't know what is on those auctions. You do not know what you're getting there. So that's something to think about, and we're going to talk about that as we get to the bid process. Now, here's our steps in the foreclosure. The reason why we are going to go into this is because as we talk about the different title problems and the things to watch out for in a foreclosure, we're going to refer to these different items. So we want to familiarize ourselves a little bit with what these actual items are. The lis pendens is basically the first document that is filed in the foreclosure. There's a few other things, complaints and things like that, but the lis pendens is recorded. This is extremely important document. When this document gets recorded, it basically says, for example, Bank of America versus, and they will list all of the people that they are wanting to basically what we call wipe out in the foreclosure. They're going to list the interest of the owner or owners or other owners that they think may have possession, tenants, things like that. They will list second mortgages, judgments that they think are on the property because they've done a title search and they see there's judgments. If there's errors in a deed, in a prior deed, they will serve that person to wipe out their interest. They actually can wipe out all of these things in this foreclosure process. So when they record that lis pendens, they are basically putting everybody on notice. It's recorded in the public records that they are about to foreclose on this property and wipe out these different various people and mortgage companies and things like that. Now, once that's recorded, any liens that come up after the recording of the lis pendens are what we call barred, because it would be very difficult for the mortgage company to keep the processes long. The LP's been recorded. It can still take a year, 2 years, 3 years to actually get to the foreclosure process. Well, in that 3 years, another lien, another judgment, something could go on record against this person. And they can't keep going back and trying to enter those in. So the second they record their lis pendens, anything that comes after that lis pendens, even the IRS, we do not worry about that anymore. It's what we call barred. Okay? So that's why that document is so important, that it gets recorded, and then right there we know, boom, it's cut off. Everybody or anybody that has an interest in this property that needs to be served is cut off at the lis pendens. That brings us to service. Now they've listed everybody that they feel they need to wipe out and basically clear this property, okay? Now they need to serve all of these people. This seems simple. It can be simple, and it can be complicated. It can be complicated by people obviously avoid the service. They don't know where the people are to serve. Businesses may have gone out, they may be out of business. The owner might be dead. So there are processes for every one of those situations, and they have to do them right. This is where we go back to, like, we had a lot of controversy in the news about foreclosures and the process not done right, and things just getting signed off, robo-signing. And a lot of it has to do with service. They'll say they served the person, never even served the person, didn't serve the second mortgage holder, didn't serve a lien holder. So that was where they were finding a lot of discrepancies. And we see them sometimes. We'll see that they served them at this, and then that person was not really at that address. So you go, that seems a little fishy. So service is a big deal, because if someone is not served, their interest is not wiped out. So that means that they could still come back and say, whoa, I didn't get served. Now, rarely will not getting served void your foreclosure, like completely mean that the mortgage is not going to be a first or take away the priority, but it can delay the process. It would mean, okay, they didn't get served, they proved they didn't get served, they've delayed the process, they have to go back in, reserve them, and do that process again. So it's a delay in it, and costs. Okay, so that's where service is. We check service on every single person listed in the foreclosure. That is one of the most important things to check for. And then once all of that is done, they've served everybody, they've done the process. If someone was deceased, there's a process for that needs to be done. They've done diligent searches if they couldn't find somebody. They've published in the newspaper if they couldn't find that person. All of the things that are required to get good service on whatever entity we're trying to serve. Once all of that is done, then they're going to go to final judgment. The judge is going to say, okay, you've done all the things that you needed to do in this action. Now we will sign off on your final judgment. And in that final judgment, they'll set a sale date. They'll say, and we will sell this property on, we call it the courthouse steps. They don't do that anymore, but on a bid auction, this date and this time. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to be that day. There's delays and delays and delays, and we'll talk a little bit about the delays as we go on. But the final judgment is really the final step that says, boom, we agree, you've done your case, we're happy, here we go. Now, the next thing is they actually will have the bid and the auction, and we're not going to go into that yet because we're going to go on a whole 1, 2, 3 of that. You're the successful bidder or the successful bidder. They will be issued a certificate of sale that day that it's auctioned. There's a certificate of sale issued. Still not done. 10 days. Now, some people will say, well, that they have a 10-day objection period. No, they do not. There's not just an arbitrary 10-day objection period. There's a 10-day time frame before they will issue their certificate of title. That is not necessarily for them to object. They can object during that process, but they have to have a reason they're objecting. They can't just go, we get 10 days and now we don't like it. No, they have to have a reason. They were not served. The owner was not served in the process. The second lien holder was not served. So they have to come up with a reason why they want to object in that 10-day period. Okay, we go to certificate of title. Okay, now we have seen where they have come up with some crazy objections and they have delayed the title being issued. But normally it's pretty much 10 days that certificate of title gets issued. At that point, you are the owner. That is your deed. The certificate of title is the deed. We call it that. And the reason you do not get what we call a deed is because when we refer to a deed in title insurance, that is a conveyance, that someone has conveyed property to you. There's no conveyance in a foreclosure because it's been taken from the owner or the lien holder, whoever's been served. So you're getting a certificate of title. There's no warranty in that. There's no guarantees in that. Nothing. It's just, here, you own this property. Now you can go possess this property. And as far as we talk about possession, there's a different process with a certificate of title than there is with tenants. If you have an eviction, you don't do an eviction. There's a form called a writ. It's a writ of possession. You're in possession now by your certificate of title. You can get a writ, and if that property is being occupied, you can take your writ and go to the sheriff's office and do the process of eviction. But you don't have to do an eviction, okay? You think, oh, I've got a writ and evict? No. You take that writ and you set up a time. They go and they take the person out of the home. Some people do go to the people and try to, talk to them, just like with any kind of auction. If someone's in there, they may go speak to them, but you want to be careful when you're doing things like that because it gives someone a chance to maybe get in this 10-day and delay a little bit. A tenant, oh, really? I didn't get a service. I didn't get this. So sometimes people don't like to do that. But if it's a good tenant, they've been paying that. We have some clients that do keep them in there and let them continue to pay some rent and work with a tenant that's in there because the tenant may be paying. And tenants do have some rights. So we have to be careful with tenants in the property because of service, but if they have a valid lease, they have some rights. There's tenant rights now that started when we had the big foreclosure boom. The tenants were really having a lot of trouble because they were paying their rent faithfully to the owner, and the owner wasn't paying their mortgage payment. So the government said, well, that really is harsh to the tenant, because the tenant has been paying. It's not their fault. They've paid faithfully. So if they have a valid lease and have proved that they've been paying and their lease is still in effect, sometimes you have to honor that lease. They do have rights. And the tenants, when we're doing a search, if we see something with a tenant and they have put a notice that they have a right, we will try to tell you that in that search that, hey, be careful, you've got a tenant that has some rights and that may keep you to that lease. Okay, a lot of times you can try to buy them out of it or you can work with them, but the tenants do have rights now. That changed recently with our foreclosure boom. All right, so let's talk about how to bid. Okay, now, very important when you're going to bid, and I'm going to start out just telling you the small process, and then I'm going to back up and be like your mom and really try to make you realize how difficult the process is. But this seems simple. You've got to register with the county. Okay? You have to get a bidder number and register with Duval County. You can't do it the day of. Really don't even suggest you do it the day before. You need to do that a week or two in advance and register. They'll give you a bidder number, and that'll be your number and you'll have a password to go into their website, and that will get you in to bid. The website that you go to is coj.net. Everybody knows that site. And how you get to the auctions, and the reason I'm going to tell you that is because what I would suggest if anybody is thinking about bidding and they haven't bid on foreclosure auctions before, really cool thing you can do. You can actually go in, you could even do it tomorrow morning. It'll be fun, do it. And you can watch the process without ever having to register. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to go to coj.net, and you're going to, when you're on the side where it has the different scroll downs, go to the departments. You're going to go to the clerk of the circuit court section. It keeps dropping down on that left side if anybody's ever navigated through that site. And then you're going to go to foreclosure auctions. You'll click it, and a site will come up. It'll tell you, and then there's a calendar. You click on the word calendar, and a calendar comes up. And it has every day. And it'll tell you how many are that day. Click on that day. You can click on tomorrow. You can click on a week ahead. I think it goes out maybe like 45 days in advance. Click on it. Do it tonight when you get home. Click on it and look at tomorrow. And you're going to come up with a list. It's going to show you, like I said, it's going to have the property address, the RE number. It's going to have the case number. That's the county's case number. It's going to have the final judgment amount, meaning the total amount the mortgage company says they're owed with their interest, penalties. That number's high. They will have a maximum bid, and then they will have a bid sometimes that's hidden. And we're going to talk about what that means in a few minutes. But it's really cool to look at that site, and I suggest you do that for at least a week or two before you jump in and actually bid. Go on that site, start looking at it, watch the process happening. It happens right in front of you. At 11 o'clock is when it starts. They'll pull up the first one, they come up, that one comes to the top, and it starts the bid. And they go in $100 increments, and you'll see the number change. Then someone will bid, let's just say someone put in a $10,000 bid, and that bid was accepted. It sits, and then it goes on a clock of 2 minutes, and then that'll go down. If someone else puts a bid in, say someone puts in 11,000, the clock starts over. Okay, so it's an interesting process to watch, and so you can do that as a public. You do not need a password just to watch the auctions happen. Now, when you register with the county, they're going to have an account set up. And you're going to need to have some money in it if you're planning on bidding. It won't take your bid if you have no money in that account. Okay, so you can open the account, you can get your reference number. You don't have to put any money in yet, but you're not going to bid. It's not going to take your bid. If you go to bid, it's not going to let you bid because you don't have any money in that account. So you need to at least have 5% in the account, 5% of your bid, plus there are some service fees and some transaction fees that the county charges. So, for example, you know you're going to go up to $50,000 on a house you see for Thursday. You need to make sure you have 5% of the $50,000 plus a couple $100 for the county's fees, because of course the county's going to take their fees first. Okay, so if that money is not, if there's not enough money in your account, it won't take your bid, because it knows your number, because you've signed in under that number, and it's not going to take that bid. So you got to plan in advance. Nice thing about that is that it also may stop people from maybe going crazy on that site, because sometimes I say, you know, it gives you a little bit of a gambling effect that can happen. It's up there, and you told yourself, I'm going to only bid $50,000 on this house, and all of a sudden it goes to $51,000, and you go, oh, 52, you know. So, you know, be careful, because you can do that. It has that effect on you. You're going, oh, come on, come on. So you want to be super careful on that. Now, they take that money out of your account. They take out the 5%. The rest of the money needs to be to them by 4 p.m. that same day. Okay? The money can be in that account. So you could go ahead the day before and put $100,000 in that account, and then you don't have to go back down there. You can call them, you can let them know, no, take it out of my account. So you do not have to spend every day going down there. A lot of people that buy a lot of auction property will just keep money in that account if they're bidding every day and don't want to deal with it. I know we're talking a lot of money right now. But that's what people do. They really do. They leave money in the account, and then it's there. They don't have to go back down there. But you don't have to. It only requires that 5% to be in the account. And then you have to bring the rest of the money, cashier's check, or you can actually wire into your account. Again, you don't have to go down there. You can send a wire into your account, and they'll pull it out of your account. But you have to. Okay, we're not going to do questions, Doug. I'm not going to be mad at you, I promise. I don't want to cut you off. We're going to get there. Okay, and we'll take all our questions. Okay, so we talked about how to bid, and let's just go. We're almost done, and then we're going to do questions because I know it's tough. Okay, see, we're going to go about 5 minutes, and then we're going to do questions because what we want to focus on is why. Have you heard anything yet that why I'm saying you need to be nervous, you need to be scared? Okay, let's say why. I'm just going to give you some examples, okay? People file bankruptcy can delay our foreclosures. People not served, not entered can cause you problems with the foreclosure. Again, more service problems. IRS, always a problem, okay? So what happens is you're going to go and you're going to feel like you're going to do one of these properties and you're going to buy it on auction, and you haven't checked anything. You don't know that everybody's been entered in. You don't know that everybody's been served. You buy the property, and then all of a sudden you try to sell it, or you try to get a loan, or you try to do anything, and we do a title search, and we say someone's not entered. Well, then Larry Bernard becomes your best friend, okay? Because he's going to charge you $2,500 to $3,000, and it's going to cost you an additional 6 months to open this case back up and deal with these problems. IRS can delay you 120 days to a year. Okay, so here's why we want to be very careful. And back to this. 5% is pulled out of your account that day. They don't do it at 11:01. They do it about an hour later. But they pull that money right out of your account. So you've bought a property. You didn't go look at it. You got gambler fever, and you saw that street, and you liked that street, and you felt good, and you thought that's a good deal on paper, and you didn't go see the house, and you put a bid in on it. And then all of a sudden your friend goes and drives over there for you because you call them and say, hey, you go look at this house real quick, and half the house has been demolished or whatever reason, burned down. And don't think does not happen. It does happen. It happens to very experienced investors too, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Your 5% is gone. Some of them are okay with that. I mean, they're never okay with it, but some of them are okay with the risk. Because what happens is, and then we can get really in depth. I know I'm giving a real general rundown on the foreclosures, but the banks, we always say they're dumb, but they're not. They're not dumb. Okay, they can do things to make people generate bids on the property. They will hide the bid. And what I broached on this a little bit. Let me just get this done, and then we'll do questions. When you see the screen come up for bidding, the bank will sometimes go ahead. They bid too. They're bidding just like you are. They put a pre-bid in, and they say their judgment could be $300,000 on the house, and they're saying we'll take $100,000. Okay, sometimes they'll disclose that to you, so you can put in a $50,000 bid. It's not going to accept it because they've already told you the bids need to start at $100,000. Okay, so what they can do to you, or if they can hide it, you don't know what their bid is, so you do have to put in your bid, and it rejects you because it's still not high enough, because it's hidden. We don't know what it says. But what they can do is when the auction starts, right when the auction starts, they can take one that they've hidden and they can drop it to some crazy number like $10,000 on a $80,000 house. And you have not had time to go look at the house, get the title search done. Okay, now some very experienced guys will still maybe bid on that, and I'm not saying you don't, but you're taking a risk. You're risking the 5% and some fees. Okay, so if you're going to risk anything on a bid that you haven't looked at anything, make sure you can feel comfortable with what you're going to lose if you tell them, no, I'm not bringing you the rest of the money because the house isn't there, it's tore down, it has horrible title problems, whatever the reason is that you're not going to continue and bring them the difference in the money. Okay. I know that did not cover everything about foreclosures, but let's take a second. I know there's going to be some questions. Doug, you're first. Okay, we're going to do a whole 40 minutes on tax deed sales. That's good. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, because I don't do like the money part with the county. But yeah, they'll take your money, whichever way you're ready to give it to them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like where you do a transfer. I would think that they do. I know, and I'm surprised if they do, because that can be taken away, but maybe they have a blocker. We have that on our escrow account. We block it in both ways, but you can block it in other ways. Like you can send an ACH and they can block that it can't come back out. So they may have some blockers with the county.
How do I do my research? I mean, how do I do research on the
Okay.
How far advanced are these houses?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm interested in, what do you say?
You're like, what?
Can I call you up and say, hey, we're going to research these houses?
Well, let's go through that. You can look at them about 45 days in advance on the schedules on what's on there. You can also look through LPs and things like that to get an idea of when things are coming. But you can look on the auction schedule, a month in advance. Right, may not. Okay, so that's far in advance. So you're 2 months in advance almost. So what you're going to do, I don't think I'd go that far in advance unless it's test cases. And that's what I tell people to do. Take one as a test case, maybe one that's in April. And use that. Just don't really bid, but just pretend you're going to bid and go through the whole process of everything you think you should do on a tester. And drive to the house, look at the house. Is somebody in it? Get out, do what you can. You've got to do that. You've got to look at the house. Got to look at the house. And then start, just like anything, just like any house that you're considering buying, even a regular purchase, start with the property appraiser. That's where you always start. Go to the property appraiser's site. How many bedrooms does it have? What does the property appraiser site say? Do an aerial shot. Look at the taxes. Familiarize yourself with the house just like you would with any house. Okay. Now, as you get better and better and feel more comfortable, you may be able to do that less and less time. Okay, but as it's first time doing it, you'd want to do at least probably 4 days, 5 days in advance. The problem with it is that they do cancel. But I will tell you this, lately the judges are really aggravated and they're not letting people cancel them as much. So we haven't seen as many canceling as they used to. So that's good news in some ways. Meaning like one will be on the auction on April 4th, and then for some reason the bank wants to cancel the sale, reschedule the sale, and you've done all this work and looked at it, and then you go in that morning and it's in the canceled section and it's not being auctioned. But here, people can file bankruptcy the day before and stop the sale. Bankruptcy stops the sale. Every time bankruptcy stops the sale. So people will delay them. Sometimes you can tell by the case number if it's an older case number. We'll see some 2008 still case numbers, and they've filed bankruptcy a lot. You think, well, they could file bankruptcy again, but we're really seeing less cancel. So that's a nice thing for that aspect of the diligence that you want to do. And then, of course, I would suggest that you do ask us to do a search on it. But don't bug me 2 weeks in advance, okay? And I don't mean that mean. We really only search them for new ones. I'll be nicer, a little nicer, because I know that how you feel and that it's difficult and you really want to get a feel for it more than 24 hours in advance. So if it's new for you and you say, Laura, I'm going to do one, I'm nervous, will you search it for me a couple days in advance? Yes, I will. It's a $25 cost to do it. The title search that we do is not a full-blown search. We check the big things. We check the service, the judgments, all interested parties are entered that are going to need that could cause you problem. Basically, what we're doing is, in our search, is trying to make sure you're not going to lose all of your money. That's a good thing. Oh, look. Oh, cool. Okay. So there's a big problem right here. Okay. So we will really focus on these two items because even if there is somebody that's missed, we may tell you, and you may buy it anyway. Okay. You might say, you know what? Like you said, $2,500, 6 months, that's okay. I'm going to keep it as a rental. It's a great deal. I can deal with that. I may be only going to bid $20,000 instead of $30,000. So just because we tell you something's wrong doesn't mean that you can't bid on it. I will never tell you not to bid on it. If you hear me say not bid on it, that house is like in bad shape. Because usually, you know, the point of investing is you take risks. I mean, that's what part of it being an investor is that to find a really good deal, there's always some risks. So I know that because of the years that I have spent with investors. So I won't tell you not to. I'll tell you what you have to deal with, and then you go from that point on what you think is best for your situation. Question?
If you've been on those and you need them, you get the place just by taking it out. Does that take precedence over a mortgage?
No. No, it doesn't. What happens is when, I'll just kind of give you a little history. Someone buys a house, they get a mortgage on the property, and they don't pay their condo fees, and it goes on for however long. And then the condominium files a lien. That's where they basically put their interest on the property when they filed the lien. The mortgage company was before that because they get a title search done when they make the mortgage. They're not going to loan any money on the property if it has a lien. But say they get a claim of lien. Now anything after that claim of lien, if there was other judgments, other loans that got done after that, those can be wiped out because it's almost like a chronological sequence in the public records. Then right. So what happens is the condominium then does an auction, and some people will say, well, why would they bother? And we agree with that in some ways, but unfortunately attorneys will get a hold of sometimes the associations and egg them on into foreclosure, but you will take ownership again. You're getting ownership, you're getting possession. If someone's in them, you have to get your writ, get them out. So even with the condominium association foreclosure, you still can take possession of that property. Now there are some auctions, a lot of people are bidding on them, so it's not just the back dues. It's still an auction process. The first judgment amount is the back dues, the fees, the attorney's fees, all of that. Say it's $10,000, and then that's where they're starting. And you're 10, he goes to 11, she goes to 12. So you're still bidding on that. It's still a bid. Okay, does that help? No. That's just you've bought. Correct. Joe? Well, most likely what's happening there is they're already not paying that either. So they're in the process of foreclosing. So yeah, it probably would. But you can work with the mortgage company. You can take possession. Absolutely. Yes, they've wiped you out because what they've done is in their foreclosure process, if it's already started, they've named the association to wipe out the association. If the foreclosure process has not started, if the LP hasn't been filed, back to what we said, started to bar things, then they have to serve you now because now you're the registered owner and wipe you out. People buy them. Go ahead. People will do that. They look at them. They'll go in, and what you look for is the list pendants. If it hasn't been filed, you know you've got a lot of time because they haven't filed their LP. So you could buy it, you could keep it, you could put a renter in there, you could rent it out for $1,000 a month. You may have only paid $10. You could go 2 years. The mortgage companies are taking longer. Not as long. They're speeding up now. So don't think that as a guarantee that it won't take 2 years.
does that mean that you get all the property inside the roads and
Well,
everything that was?
no, you have to do the same exact process with the foreclosure. You have to go and do the writ just like that, and the person has that time to get out. You can't walk in and tell them to get out. Just like it's the same concept as an eviction or a writ. So now if they leave it, just like a foreclosure, if they leave it, then yeah, that's your stuff to deal with. Usually that means more of a hindrance than a help, because now you got to get a dumpster and get all of it out there. But yes, if you've done your process properly and you've done your writ and you've done those things properly, then yes. But you want to make sure you're doing it properly, because we've heard horror stories of people saying, oh, something was there, the person stole it, they didn't get their writ, they kicked me out.
Before you buy it and pay the $10,000,
Mm-hmm.
you have to get the homeowner to sign it.
No, you do not. You are now the owner of the property.
It's essentially a sub-B2 at that point.
Sort of, yes, to the first, or whatever, Now sometimes there's not mortgages on them, but that's very rare. Okay, and there's some title issues associated with it, that we can talk about. Sucks. Yep, we can check, and you can see them right online too. You can do your own search, but if you don't feel comfortable with that, we can check them for you. It won't tell you the amount of the mortgage that's due. Sometimes there's ways, like sometimes I can tell if LPs are filed, and I can guesstimate, and I can use some of my expertise to get an idea of what I think that mortgage balance is. But usually you're not going to want it like that. Most of the time people are buying them more just to keep and rent them until they can, get through that process. Sometimes you can go to the mortgage company and do almost like a short sale. Is a concept to think about. To go to the mortgage company and say, I bought it, the thing, will you work with me? Will you assign your mortgage? Will you take a short pay? Will you do these things? So those are things to think about with the association.
So you really want to keep the property for a while, not just rent it out as bank stock.
Yeah, which is a great point, because there's some, ethical part to that is difficult. There really is.
I guess the indicator be negotiated on that. Look and see what the last mortgage was really long, what it was long, how long it was. Look at the value, figure out.
Exactly. Yes. That's what I'm going to do. That's all I'm going to do when you do it. I'm just going to probably do it a little quicker, just because I do them a lot. But that's all I'm going to do. Yes. So that's something that you can do. We'll come to you next. Go ahead. Okay.
Not being one of those, obviously, reported, pretty straightforward.
Correct. And we're going to go through a lot of that when we get to the end of the class, if we can make it through. But let's just mention it a little bit in case we don't get to the end, because it's going to be difficult. Code violations really can't be wiped out in a foreclosure if they're on that property. Now, some different code violations that you see, that may be the owner owned 10 houses and he had one on another property, they can enter that in to make sure it doesn't affect the property they're foreclosing. But you cannot wipe out tax collector, taxes, code violations, nuisance liens, and none of that can be wiped out in any. Oh yes, yeah. Well, no, no. Even if it's filed after the LP, you're not getting rid of any code lien. You still have to deal with the county.
But the tax one,
the IRS, that's different. The IRS is different. The IRS, in the concept with it is because a code lien or a tax collector or a nuisance lien actually was that property. It actually affected that property. An IRS lien is just that person owned it, didn't pay his taxes, and then he got a lien just like any other lien. But the code violations, the county did some work probably, or there's work that needs to be done. So you cannot get rid of those. Okay, and we will talk more about those if we get time to do that. There's just really not. My biggest secret is I have a plant And what a plant is a title plant. And what the difference for that is that the title plant, then we pay a lot of money for that. So you can't really get that. But what they do is they take all of the public records and they sort them by legal description instead of by owner, by name. Whereas the public records are indexed under names. Whereas the plant takes that extra step, takes all of those records from the county, puts it in a database that then synchronizes them under legal. So I can put in that legal description into that system and it spits out a printout. So that's my advantage. Yeah. So that's where the advantage for us is. Let me get his first because he had a question. Yes, that's the IRS has a right of redemption, kind of like what I mentioned when we looked here about problems with the IRS. Whenever the IRS is entered, now if they're after the LP, we don't care. But if they were before the LP, the IRS had it, the person owed the IRS a tax lien. The IRS is entered into a foreclosure. They're wiped out, but they get a 120-day right of redemption. So you have to wait 120 days if the IRS is entered in. And what that is they have the right to come back and redeem it. Now people think that makes them nervous, but it doesn't, because they have to pay the final judgment amount if they redeem it. So rarely is the IRS going to redeem a property. Most of these final judgments are 4 times the value of the property. So the IRS is not going to do it, but it's a technicality that will hold you up for 120 days. If the IRS had a mortgage on the property, and sometimes you say, well, why would they have a mortgage? Secretary of Housing and Urban Development has a mortgage on the property. They did a special program where they helped someone with the home. If the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development has a mortgage on the property, it's a second, let's say, down payment, different things like that, they get a 1-year right of redemption. That's very rare. We will be telling you about that if we see that in the search.
I mentioned to you guys that I had a house under contract for 18 times. Lauren is the one that told me that the 1-year right of redemption. And I said, when did it expire? And she said, in about 4 months. So we went back. I offered them 6,000 instead of 18 times. They said no, but they would take 8,500 because of that title flaw. We got to know about the law I told you. So I bought it for 8,500. We repaired it. We're in it at about 22,000. We're in it for cash. And Alex rented it for me about 4 months ago on FUD. It's $935 a month.
Right, so what I'm going to do when I search that property, or whoever searches that property, we're going to tell you, this is here. Right, and I'm not going to tell you don't buy it. I'm going to say this is what the deal is. You decide. You run your numbers. You make that decision.
Laura couldn't insure the title.
Yeah, you can't get title insurance without the exception on those. So that is a hindrance in doing anything like that. Selling it can be a trouble. You can't sell it.
The risk that Joe took in that example is that 20,000+ in it. Did the IRS go back and take it for 8,500?
No, they have to pay the final judgment amount. No. The final judgment the mortgage company had, the huge everything that was owed. So the risk is, the risk is very minimal. It's just hold you up. The title company won't, like, you couldn't buy it and then sell it. Like, he could not sell it. We cannot give title insurance. They would have to pay the final judgment amount. I'll give you an example of one. Let's say that there's a first mortgage on a property that was $60,000 mortgage. And, like, let's use Joe. Say the mortgage was $60,000. They didn't pay for a year. They penalties. The final judgment was $85,000. They also didn't pay the IRS, and the IRS had a lien. They entered the IRS in. The right of redemption means that they have the right to redeem it, but they have to redeem it for the final judgment amount, the $85,000. Right. So they don't do that. Now, if there's equity, right, they only do that if they're smart. They don't do it. We've had them do it. People always say, well, have they ever done it? Yes, of course. In my 23 years, yes, they have done it. But it's when there's equity. So we'll tell you that. I'll say, look, we don't care about the IRS on 9 out of 10 times. And then all of a sudden, I'm giving you a hard time going, hey, this one's a problem because of the IRS, because there was some equity in the property. That's when the IRS would be wanting to redeem it, not on a final judgment amount that's 3 and 4 times. Because it's not what you paid for it. They don't get that That was a bid. You don't bid for the IRS you negotiate for the IRS. They have to pay that final judgment amount to redeem it.
So they don't have to pay Joe back?
Yeah, Joe's the owner. He's the judge.
They gotta pay.
Oh, they have to pay final judgment to you?
They gotta pay every.
They have to, basically what they would do in Joe's case, because Joe bought it from the bank, they would go to the bank they would redeem it, the bank would get their money, and then the bank would give Joe his money. But in a foreclosure, like if you'd bought it at the auction, you actually become the plaintiff. You are the plaintiff, and they would have to deal with you. So they just don't do that. That just doesn't happen. That's not smart.
Out there watching these properties, their chances of one getting through that had equity in it are slim. And it would have been a short sale before, right? Exactly.
Okay, I know. Go ahead. Okay, we're going to cut off in a minute, sorry, and move on to tax deed sales because we're never going to get there, but that's okay.
They pay him back his bid amount or bid plus renovation costs?
No renovation costs. So sometimes I'll tell people don't work on it for those few times. Correct. No. But what happens is, okay, there are some things in a foreclosure that they have to do certain things in certain time frames. So sometimes you'll see if you have a super old case, the LP isn't, but the judge can void the LP because there's been no action. So he might say, you've let this open case sit for 2 years with no action, no service, no diligence is going on. You're not doing anything. And they